So now we need to update the user's password from the WPF side of the Faceta Word application. So in this video, we're going to add the actual change password function in the settings page as the last piece of the settings page, and then that completes the user settings on both the server and the WPF. So let's get into it. So I've got the Faceta Word server up and running in the background so that we can hit it up for the password change requests. And then I've opened up the WPF Word application as well. So let's get straight into editing the password. So one of the first things I've noticed before we get into it is that we've also lost this UI, the design time UI in the main window, and it's saying it can't create an instance of page host. So if we just open page host, I think the issue is since we changed the view models to the DNA framework from ninject, we no longer have default things when you try to get out of the framework if it wasn't bound before. Ninject simply returns a new instance instead of saying null, whereas the .NET Core's dependency injection will actually return null. So this is returning null because either the framework hasn't been set because it's design time, and also the service has not been bound either. So instead of doing this kind of binding here to the view model if we're in design time, instead we can just make a new application view model and then do the current page just for the design time visual, which is what ninject would have done anyway as the fallback. So this is how it would have worked anyway. And now if we build that, I presume we'll get the UI back. So we've got the UI back in the background for the home page. Now the settings controller's also got an issue. So let's just go to settings control, and let's take a look. Same thing, view model settings. Now that's actually set by default. There is no check if it's anything but. So set the design to the view model if we are in design mode. So if designer properties dot get is in design mode, and then just pass this in so it's got a reference. Create new instance of settings view model. So then the data context is new settings view model. Otherwise, it's bound to the dependency injection version. Hopefully that will get us back the settings controller as well. There we go. So that's got us back the UI. So that's one little annoyance. Now the next one is, in the last video we updated all of the routes. So if we just do a quick search for HTTP, that was a mistake. Include localhost. So we'll update these four. I'll just pin that for a moment. These now want to use the there's something else we need to add as well. We've got this part, but we also need the host. So this we can chuck into our app settings.json. So in here, we want to chuck in, I thought we'd already got some settings. Maybe we've never used any, like specific for Faceta settings. See if we've got configuration anywhere. Kind of a broad search, but so no, we don't use it anywhere. So that's surprising. I thought we had. We'll make a custom section then. So in the configuration, this will be for, I guess, the API routes. So we either do this as a Faceta Word section maybe, or Faceta Word server. We can change it to whatever, but let's start with that. And we'll just do host URL, I guess. And that can be HTTP localhost :5000. Then we should also bind that to the server when it spins up to bind, well, we don't really need to, but we can bind the port to that as well to make sure it stays the same. But that's mind you, this is a configuration file, so it doesn't matter. So now we just want to pull the Faceta Word server host URL from the configuration, which should be, let me just run it on a app.xaml. Oops. Get rid of that a minute. So we've got all that in, and then at this point we're available. So let's just try var test equals configuration, which should be pulled in from framework DI. Good. So configuration, and then can we do that? Yes. And I think it's Versetto word server colon, and then whatever the name is to go inside. So host URL. So I'm thinking this should get us that URL, and then we can just edit that inside the actual the config file then, and that gives us a nice configurability there. So now test is, that's it, valid. So now what we need to do is to take that and do the search again for HTTP localhost, and now we can alter these four, and this can be potentially a helper function, which is in roots, which is in core, what we've just made, roots. API roots will have now, shift F2, root helpers, or root extensions. Extension methods. And then this will be extension methods for, well, I guess can't really be extension methods because there's nothing to extend on it. Will be helpers. Root helpers. Yep, rename that as well. So helper methods for getting and working with roots. And then here we'll have public static string get absolute URL, or get absolute root, let's call it, so it doesn't get confused with the built-in .NET Core stuff. And then we can have the, and if this is in, we can always presume that configuration is available in dependency injection in the same place. So the only thing we need here is the actual relative URL. And then we can return the configuration, which is in using static, is it in, I forget, where is it in? Versetto word DI. Or not. Where is configuration? Come on, where is it? Okay, let's just find it another way. Core DI. Is that in there? No, it's framework DI, isn't it? Oh, hang on, is it the, obviously DNA dot framework DI. I keep forgetting it's actually baked into DNA. So we have the configuration. Now we could do just relative URL like this, which I think is what we should do. The only thing you've got to bear in mind is we don't expect the, well, no, let's do it a different way. If we don't end the URL with a /, and we also don't end the relative part, and we just say like create, we're going to end up with them just mangled together like that. So what we can do is simply make sure that one has the /. So we could just do var host equals this, and that can be get the host. If the relative URL does not start with /, so if relative URL dot starts with, and if it doesn't start with that, of course you want a string, and they're never going to pass null in there. They might want to, so we can just do a null check. Maybe we can't. So I guess we could do another one. If relative URL, and if it's string dot is null or empty, so if they don't want to do anything, if they are not passing any URL, return the host. So we can do that. So get the host. If they're not passing any URL, return the host. Otherwise, if the relative URL doesn't start with a /, add the /. So relative URL equals / relative URL. So we're always going to make sure there's a / at the start. And now I can just return the two combined together. Return combined URL. And I guess capitalize it everywhere we use it. So that should now be the helper. Returns the absolute URL, including the host URL. The relative URL. And I think that's it. Well, again, the return should say returns the absolute URL, including the host. So really that's the returns description. I still can't get used to using this returns because I haven't used it much. And so the summary is converts a relative URL into an absolute URL. And then it returns the absolute URL, including the host URL. So that will do. We now have root helpers.getAbsolute URL, and the settings pulled in from the settings. So we can finally get back to this part. So now this with API login can change to root helpers.getAbsolute URL, and we also want that from API roots.login, or API login was it? No, it was just login. And let me just undo that a sec. It was that, wasn't it? API login. Do we actually have an API login? Let me double check that a minute. I don't remember an API login. Oh, the login is API login, but we've called it just... Oh yeah, it's in the API roots. What am I talking about? It's already in there. Just ignore me. Right, so API roots login, there we go. So that now can be copied, pasted to the register one, and swap that for register. And then the settings one is user profile. So that's the get user profile. And the update user profile, we can now remove the to do. Set URL. Set URL. And create the user details to send, that's wrong. Pass in user token. And we are not, that's the register, that's why we're not doing that. So set the URL, set the URL, create API model. That's it. So we're all good there now. So that will get us to having the API roots now in a decent place that aren't just hard coded. We've fixed the compile time issue. So now it's on to actually doing the save password call, I think is the last thing. And that will be in settings view model. And we've already got it all plumbed in and ready to go. We just need to do the actual call. So that'll be in command methods, open logout, clear data, load, right, save password here. So much like the other ones, we could, we will, copy and paste the starting point. So locks the command to ignore others, and it will be the password is changing, so we lock that. And then this time, We're not going to use this helper because that's specific to the credentials. This is a password. So we're going to ignore that and do our own work here now. So in here, first we want to start making use of the logger as we mentioned. So we will just log some debug information, changing password. And I also like to, when I can remember, just put the $, there, so that if we're ever copying and pasting lines and we want to kind of inject some stuff, we've got the $, ready to do that. Is this just void to Boolean, just because we haven't returned anything yet? Yes, that's just complaining while we go. So then we want to get the current known credentials, which is, I could just copy and paste this, but it's easy enough. Client data store.get login credentials. Then make sure the user has entered the same password in the actual view model first. Just put return true so that stops complaining until we're done. So if password.new password.unsecure isn't equal to, directly equal to, so we're not going to do a string compare because we want to make sure it's exactly the same password. Then if that's the case, we want to display error. So we'll use the UI to show the message. New message dialog box. I'll just scroll this down a minute. Then in there we need to localize still. I've got to do that video soon. We'll set the title to password mismatch. We'll set the message to new password and confirm password must match. So that'll display the error to the user, and then we can return false there. So return that we've failed. So we've logged that we're changing the password, we've got the credentials, we've checked if the password matches, and then if it doesn't, we return fail. So at this point here, if we have the password, well, rather, if they've typed the same password, then we simply want to attempt to now change the password. So update the server with the new password. So same as all of them, simply if var result equals await web requests dot post async, then we're expecting an API response because it's simply true or false. Then what do we want? The URL. So now we have root helpers. Root helpers dot get absolute URL, and this is. Did we do one for the password? Yeah, we should have. So API roots dot update user password. There we go. So that's set URL, and what's next? Content. So pass the AO create API model, new update user password API model, and the current password equals current password dot current password dot unsecure. New password equals password dot new password dot unsecure, and that's up to there. Then we want to pass the, what did we say to the other one? Pass the bearer token or something. Where did we use it? I want to use the same comment. Pass in user token. In fact, just copy that line. So that should call the server, pass in all the details, get a result. And then once we've got the result, there's just a case of checking for the error in the same way. So once we get the result, it's basically display error, log it, return false, and then log otherwise successful. So we can copy that bit from the helper function and paste it in here. So if the response has an error, then the failure was in, we're calling it updating or changing, so changing password. Save, we've got 3 different ways. We've got changing password, save password, update password. We should probably unify them at some point. So the error can say change. Let's at least keep it semi-consistent. Change password is going to be the title of the failure. And if it did fail, then we should log that it failed as well. So we should say failed to change password and also the reason why. And then we return false. Otherwise, if we get here, we've succeeded. So we should actually say that really. Otherwise, we succeeded. So we log that we successfully changed password. And we don't say anything about the password, obviously. And then return successful. And I think, in a nutshell, that should, fingers crossed, change my password. So unless I've done something wrong, that should be all we have to do. So let's first check anything else works. Change my name. That's working. Let's restart and make sure that's now still the new name. So now my name is Luke2. Cool. So that's Luke. Now password. First thing we're going to do is enter nothing. Just press incorrect passwords. That's good. So if I then enter the correct password, if I can actually remember what I've set it to, and enter nothing for the new password, incorrect passwords, that's not my password. There we go. So now it's saying the password must be at least 5 characters. So this is the response from the server, which is the response from the user manager, which is set by our, in fact, let me show you. That's cool. That's a massive box. So that is coming from the web server startup, I believe we are in. Hide that. When we add the identity, we can provide, here we go, some, that's token validation. There we go. So we're configuring the identity options, which is what the user manager uses. And this is where we've set the requires a digit, required length, blah, blah, blah. All these requirements have fallen into this message. So that's where it's coming from. That's part of .NET Core's ASP.NET identity thing. So now that's working. So let's try and enter a new password. So I'll just say test, and I'll enter test with a different character. So it's they don't match. And this should tell us new password and confirm must match, which is correct. If I enter test for both, then password must be at least 5 characters. So that's all working. So now let's enter password 1, which should actually work. Password 1. And that, there we go. So now it's changed. And again, remember, when we succeed, we will have some kind of toast notification or pop-up down here. We'll do something about the success of things. That's why you kind of just, it fades off and it's done, but there's no kind of pop-up because we need to make that kind of toast system. So that now, if I remember, I've just changed it to, what was it? Password 1, I think I said it was. We're already logged in. So, oops, I'll just restart the server. I've done that again. Minimize the server, stop this one. And then I'll log out. Well, first I should stay logged in because the token hasn't changed as my password has, which is fine. So if I log out now and I try log back in, my old password, which I think was just password, shouldn't work, which it doesn't. Password 1, however, should work now. There we go. So I better change that back to password, otherwise I'll forget. So password 1, password, password. Yeah, that worked. So it's going to crash then. So there we go. We have now the settings page fully done, I believe. So that's all there is to it. That's now the user settings page completely done. So we can edit all the user's details. We can change a password. We can sign out. We can sign in. I guess ultimately we should add the ability to delete accounts as well. So we'll add that at some point. But I'm going to kind of move on from that now and get onto the interesting stuff. So I think really next up we've got to start thinking about actually having either friends in the system or how we now communicate with other people. So we'll push this server live to a public site so all you guys can sign up. And then we'll move on to actually talking to each other. So sending chat messages is the whole point of the application. So it's going to come together really quickly. As always, I always say, just leave comments in the video. If you've got any questions or comments about anything, just, post them in the video. If you think I did anything wrong, same thing. The comments are there for a reason, so make use of them. I do answer everyone that I get, and give feedback on them. And again, I hope this video was useful.